Hello and welcome. This is Nahid Casazza, and what you're about to watch is an edited version of a recent talk I did for the Forum of Applied Neuroscience. The full session is posted on my YouTube channel and runs about an hour and 20 minutes. In this version, I've taken out the introduction and a lot of the Q&A and discussion to make it a little bit shorter for you. Enjoy.
All right, excellent. So I think I want to start by giving you some context of where I'm coming from. So how this applies to me. Why did it intrigue me? So as a leadership coach, one of the things that I find is that a lot of the time I spend with my clients involves helping them understand what their stress triggers are. Because when leaders are most unproductive at work, it's because they're really stressed out and their stress is infecting everybody around them, and their teams are getting intimidated, and have an edge to their voice, and they're also not as effective in their ability to deal with challenging situations. So one of the most important things I do with my leaders is help them identify their stress triggers and become aware of the behavior patterns that they sometimes exhibit as a result of their stress that can be very self-destructive, and help them turn that around. So when I came across this book, his program, his mental fitness system, gives a very simple tool and process to do just that. So that's kind of one of the big clicks in my brain, as this is going to be great to work with my clients. The other challenge that I think a lot of us who are coaches on this call might share is that sometimes when you go into an organization and you coach a leader, you get maybe 6 months with them. And so they may become very aware of behavior patterns that serve them and don't serve them during those 6 months. And they may be able to stay focused on the ones that aren't serving them and even make some changes. But then once they're not working with me anymore, and they're not getting that constant reminder to keep noticing these things and to keep paying attention and make these shifts, they will often lapse back into old behavior patterns after the coaching assignment is over, and especially when they're under stress. So again, if you have any kind of a tool that's simple, that they can remember, and anything that they can practice, then they can continue to do this after the coaching time is over, after the official coaching time is over, and they will make more permanent changes. So that's another thing that was really exciting to me about the model that Shirzad has in this book, is that it has a large focus on practice. And it's a very simple system, so it's super easy to remember. The third thing that I thought is really incredible is that, and any of you who work with people, and probably from your own experience, stress at work affects home, and stress at home affects work. So anytime I can give my clients a tool that they not only can use to strengthen the relationships at work, work more effectively with their teams, mentor more effectively, et cetera, but they can also apply to their families and their kids and their spouses, they're going to be really happy, and it's going to have a better effect on them because it's going to reduce their total stress. In fact, many of the CEOs I worked with immediately started applying things in their family life, just because it's so important to them. So the great thing, Shirzad coaches CEOs with this model, and he always makes the program, when he has them go through the boot camp, he always makes them go through it with their work teams, but then he also opens it up to their families so that they're always also going through the same program with their families. So that's sort of my context, the context that I come to this in. So let me tell you a little bit about Shirzad. So Shirzad has lots of degrees. He has a degree in psychology. He has an MBA. He's also an engineer. And what he has done is taken all of his fields of study and also synthesized a lot of research. A lot of the research is in neuroscience, but also in other areas. So his research is based in neuroscience, in positive psychology, in cognitive psychology, and in performance science. So he's kind of taken all of these fields of study, many studies that we've already known, and he's compiled it all and put it into one model. The definition of mental fitness is your capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive rather than a negative mindset. And the impact of mental fitness is increased performance, increased peace of mind and wellness, and healthy relationships. The reason he's using mental fitness to describe this is it makes a lot of sense in terms of this is the core of what takes us from a state of mind where we may be stressed and reactive to a state of mind where we're feeling more mental resilience and well-being. And from that state of mind, we're able to be more effective in everything we do. And what he did is factor analysis on the research. So this is his engineering brain. So he took things like all the types of programs that us as coaches bring in to organizations, 5 dysfunctions of a team, crucial conversations, emotional intelligence. There's so many that programs, they're all really, really good, but they tend to have a lot in common. And his main question is, what does all of this have in common? And is there a way that we can simplify it into something that people can easily remember and can make them more effective across the board? So one of the things he shares is that root cause results in radical simplification. And the example he likes to use in his presentations is that the root of all of the colors are the 3 primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. Okay, so his model is based basically on 3 parts. And what I'm going to do today is show you just, first of all, a very, very brief overview. What are those 3 parts? And then I'm going to let you dive in and have a little experience of it, and then we'll go into those 3 parts in more detail. So we'll start with what he calls, so 2 of the 3 parts, he calls the saboteur brain and the sage brain. And for those of you who are really into neuroscience and all the little parts of the brain, we're not talking about specific areas of the brain here, but what we're talking about in your saboteur brain are all the various different areas and systems in the brain that are active when we're under a lot of stress. So for example, for those of you who have read Crucial Conversations and probably have done other studies, we know about the amygdala hijacking. So when we react to something before we even think, right? So that's part of the saboteur brain, but also parts of your brain where you have a lot of negative thinking patterns, where we're making up negative stories to explain things. That would be considered part of your saboteur brain. And then your sage brain would be the part of your brain that is active when you're in a place of creativity and flow and focus. It's usually when you're feeling a high level of calm and well-being. You're very clear-headed. A great example of that might be when you're in flow mode. So when you're working on something that you're highly engaged in and you're completely immersed in it, and you're not worried about all this stuff going around outside you. You don't have a committee running in your head. Your mind is completely focused. So Shirzad teaches at Stanford, and his Stanford students call his program Jedi Mind Training, because they think about the saboteur brain as the Darth Vader brain, and they think about the sage brain as the Jedi brain. And I'm a Star Wars fan. I love the idea of the Jedi brain because it really helps you understand how powerful being in sage mode is. Because Jedis weren't weak, they were powerful, but they were powerful in a very calm, focused way. And I think that's a great metaphor to just explain what we're looking for here. So our whole goal in this model is to recognize what is going on when I'm in saboteur mode, what is going on when I'm in sage mode, and how do I move myself from saboteur mode to sage mode so that I can be more effective. So there's a third part of this system, and that is called self-command. And this might be the most important part when it comes to practice, because self-command is the muscle. So we're going along with the mental fitness idea, and each of these components is going to be referred to as a muscle. And we'll talk about that in more detail in a second. But your self-command is the strength that you have to recognize when you're in saboteur mode, catch yourself, and move you to sage mode. And so there's a lot of practice that you have to do to get yourself into sage mode, and you have to practice building the self-command muscle. And so we're going to talk more about that in a minute. I'm going to go into more details in all 3 of these areas. But what I would like to do is give you all an opportunity to experience this right now, if you'd like. And if you'd like, this only takes a couple of minutes. You can go onto the Positive Intelligence sites, and hopefully you can do it without dropping off this call, and take your PQ score. Your goal is to have a score and maintain a score of 75 or above. And you shouldn't have that high of a score now, especially if you haven't heard of this. But the reason is, and what this assessment basically tells you is how often are you experiencing stress and being run by your saboteur brain versus how often are you experiencing kind of calm and peace of mind and being run by your sage brain. And our goal is a 3-to-1 ratio, which is why we're looking for a score of 75 or above. So 75 means 75% of the time, 3-to-1, you're using sage brain, and 25% of the time you're using saboteur brain. So I saw a couple people were above 75. That means that you're kind of in Buddha mode quite a bit, and that's good. But don't despair if you're lower. That just means that you have a lot of the stress that you're experiencing. And what we're going to talk about now is how do you get the score up? So again, I love the simplicity of this. The idea is that that score you want to have and maintain at 75 or above, right? So how do you do it? Well, how you do it is you build 3 core muscles. So there's only 3 core muscles that you have to work to build, and they're at the root of mental fitness. The 3 muscles are called the Saboteur Interceptor, the sage, and self-command. And so now I'm going to go through each of those 3 muscles and give you a little bit more information about them all. All right. So there are 10 saboteurs. And essentially your saboteur interceptor muscle is your ability to recognize the saboteurs and, observe them so that they don't have as much power over you. The most important saboteur is the judge. Everybody has a judge, and the judge in your mind is that negative voice in your head that tells you that something is bad. And it either tells you that you're bad, it tells you that someone else is bad, or it tells you that a situation is bad. And it tells you that that situation is bad, and as it's telling you that, your stress is going up. Because you can't stand the bad and you want to do something about it. There are 9 accomplice saboteurs. We all have 2 or 3 of them that we tend to default to. And these accomplice saboteurs help the judge deal with the badness. You have the controller, the avoider, the victim, the pleaser, the restless, the hyperachiever, the stickler, the hypervigilant, the hyperrational. But when you take the saboteur assessment, you're going to get a result something like this. And this is going to tell you about your accomplice saboteur. So it's not going to measure whether you have judge or not, because we all have judge. So judge is your main saboteur. It's going to give you some more information about what are the loudest accomplice saboteurs in your brain. And in this example, this person has stickler as one of her top ones. And so you may also get a little bit of a profile on your top 2. And it kind of gives you the characteristics. So the stickler is punctual, methodical, kind of a perfectionist, and they get really, really irritable and critical if things aren't going right. So each saboteur has a profile and a specific set of characteristics and thinking patterns that you can learn to recognize in action. Each saboteur motivates you based on fear and other negative emotions, thereby limiting your effectiveness. So the stickler is really good at getting things right and doing things the right way. But if they overdo that in response to stress, then what happens is they get a lot of judgy energy, and that energy kind of infects everyone else around them. And so everyone around them feels negative and deflated. And it also damages the person, because besides the fact that everyone else is feeling criticized and demeaned around them, they're also feeling really, really stressed. And sometimes they get stuck because they can't move because things aren't right. So they can't make decisions, for example. So every one of these saboteurs has a kind of a profile with thinking patterns that you can learn to recognize. And when you go through the boot camp, you learn more about the ones that come up to the top for you so that you can recognize them when they're happening. One of the things that is really easy to kind of help you recognize when you're in saboteur mode versus when you're in sage mode is that the saboteurs motivate you through negative emotions. So, for example, you may still get great work done if you are being taken over by your judge and your stickler accomplice, but you're going to feel really awful. And you may be, let's say, doing a paper that a project that you need to get done, and you may go over it and over it and over it and over, and you may be experiencing lots of adrenaline while you're doing that when you're under the stickler. Oh, this isn't right. Let me spend more time. You might end up spending 5 times as long as you want to spend on it, but you still might get it done. So when you're in saboteur mode, and the stickler isn't the only one, it's just the one I shared because there's the profile there, but every single saboteur has its different way of sabotaging you or making it really, really difficult for you to be effective. So you can still get a measure of success, but the cost associated with that is tons of stress, tons of drain, tons of depletion, and a lot of damage in the relationships around you. However, when you're in sage mode, you not only get the same amount of work done, you actually get it done better because what you're being motivated by is positive emotions like engagement and interest and curiosity. Wow, I wonder what I'm going to learn about that. There's not a lot of self-judgment, so you don't blame yourself for mistakes. And you can really get interested in the projects that you're doing. You can plan for them, you do them well, you do them with more focus. If you get interruptions, you don't snap at people because you're in a state of well-being. So one sign that you're in saboteur mode is if you're feeling any negative emotion at all. So if you're feeling frustration or impatience or anxiety or depletion, exhaustion, you're in saboteur mode. And the goal is that you're never operating under negative emotions. And some people think that's absolutely crazy because they think it's impossible. And so they say, well, wait a minute, I need my negative emotions. I need my anger to stand up for myself. I need my anxiety and all that adrenaline to get my project done at the end of the day. And so a good question, a good thing to think about is pain good for you? And the answer to that is yes, pain is good for you, but it's only good for you for about a second, right? So if you think about this hand on the hot stove, is it good for the hand to burn? Sure. But is it good for you to keep your hand on that hot stove? Absolutely not. All negative emotions, just like pain, are helpful, but only as an alert signal. Your negative emotions are your signal. Wait a minute, something's going on right now that could be a threat to me, right? That I need to pay attention to. We want to develop this attitude that, or this frame of reference that never is being in a negative emotion really healthy or good for me from a mental fitness perspective. But it's always good for me in terms of alerting me to something that I need to pay attention to. And the best thing to pay attention to is what saboteur is going on right now. So it's a sign to pay attention to the negative self-talk in your head, listen to what it says, pick out the story. And with all of these saboteurs characterized, it's usually easy to catch. All right. So the saboteur interceptor muscle is kind of the first muscle of these 3. And the second muscle is the sage muscle. Again, when he talks about sage, it's not like you've got a sage brain on the right side of your head and a saboteur brain on the left side of your head. A lot of these parts of your brain are on both sides, but what he's focusing in on are the parts of the brain that come into play when you're in that Jedi mindset. So when you're feeling positive emotions, when you're feeling peace and calm, when you're feeling clear-headed focus, creativity, big picture. So parts of the right brain, what he calls the empathy circuitry, which involves mirror neurons, that type of thing. So there's a sage perspective, and that is that no matter what is going on in the world, every outcome or circumstances can be turned into a gift and opportunity. And a lot of times people will push back on that right in the beginning. They go, well, how can this horrible thing be turned into a gift or an opportunity? But it is pretty all-encompassing. Everything that's going on that feels bad can be shifted and turned into a gift or an opportunity. And what we practice in the boot camp are how to do that. So the 5 sage powers, so there's 10 saboteurs, there's 5 sage powers. The 5 sage powers are empathize, explore, innovate, navigate, and activate. And what we do in the boot camp is we take situations that bother us a little bit and we ask ourselves, well, how can this be turned into a gift or an opportunity? And I love this. This has been a huge shift. Now, I actually started using this in my own life, this idea in my own life several years ago, and it's made a huge difference. But I love this practice because I can take anything that's going wrong today that seems just like irritating and just a waste of my time. And I can say, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I improve myself as a result of engaging with this? And just asking myself that question produces that shift and enables me to engage with it and deal with it if it's a problem, but not feel negative about it. So we practice this with things that bother us a little bit, and we keep doing the practice with all 3 muscles. So I'll explain the third muscle in a little bit. And then as time goes on, we start practicing it with bigger and bigger things, because always in the class comes up, well, how could this horrible thing? I remember when I was doing one of the trainings, the big explosion in Lebanon happened, and some people in our class were from there. And they said, how can I turn this into a positive? And it was really painful, but I was on this call with Shirzad and all of these people, and there was a lot of processing that we did together as a group. Is how can you take something horrible like that happened and turn it into a gift or an opportunity? And the truth is that even if you have pain or grief that you're going through, you can go through grief, and at some point you can turn things. And a lot of times he gives the example of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So parents who've had their children die and then have, after their period of grief, have kind of turned things around and created a nonprofit or done something in hopes that this won't happen to other people, educating other parents, for example. So there's still things that can be created that are positive in the world, even from some of the most horrible things that happen. So let's go to the third muscle. Remember, 3 muscles, and that gets your PQ score up. So the third muscle is the self-command muscle. And this is kind of, as I had said earlier, kind of the most important muscle when it comes to how do I make this shift? How do I go from saboteur mode to sage mode? And the core of the self-command muscle and how to build it is by doing 10-second, what he calls PQ reps. And a PQ rep is 10 seconds of complete focus on a physical sensation. So we could all do it here right now. Cheryl's in the group right now, and Cheryl taught me this. She was in my pod, and she said just 3 breaths is a PQ rep. And we can all do that now, just 3 deep breaths right now. And just notice, that's it. That's 1 PQ rep. Just notice, do you feel a little different? It's amazing because I feel different just after doing that, right? So that is 1 PQ rep, 10 seconds, 3 breaths. But there are other little tricks, like Shirzad has you do this thing where you rub your finger against your thumb. It's kind of the main one that a lot of his CEOs like to do, because it's something you can do subtly when you're in an intense boardroom and people are all contentious and yelling at each other, and you can kind of pay attention to your fingers rubbing against each other without anybody knowing that you're doing it, and that can calm you down and kind of move your shift. So for those of you that have done some degree of meditation or yoga or mindfulness practice, what you'll notice is that this is very similar. It's basically a core factor of those things. So when you spend a lot of time meditating, or you go to a yoga class, or you do mindfulness practices, you know what it does to your brain. It completely shifts you from one place to another place. But what the challenge is that, first of all, for a lot of people, it's really hard to find time to meditate and do mindfulness practices. But for those who do, Usually what they'll do is they'll wait until they can find a really peaceful time and place and do it then, and do it for maybe 15 full minutes or something like that. And although it's really helpful when they do it, it often doesn't help them when they're at their crazy, work environments, when people are interrupting them and they're trying to get work done and they have interruptions and they have 5 different people coming to them at once and they have a team conflict and 2 people on their team can't get along. And so a whole project's at risk because those 2 refuse to speak to each other. So you've got all of this going on. It is really hard to get into that mind frame. So what he's done is he's boiled it down into 10 seconds. And what I like to call these are mindful moments, but he calls them PQ reps. And what's really important is you just pepper them throughout your day and you try to get as many done as possible. This is the practice. This is the practice that will raise your PQ score. So the goal in the book, so if you get the book and you read it, the goal is to do 100 of these a day. And it could be anything from paying attention to the soles of your feet and the pressure as you're walking to the bathroom. So he suggests coming up with sort of triggers during the day to remind you to do a few PQ reps. When you're in the boot camp or you're in the program, because you're doing so much learning related to this, he knocks it down to 36. So my goal is to get 36 PQ reps in during the day at some point. You can do something like a yoga workout in the beginning of the day or the end of the day, and that'll give you all of your reps for the day, but that's not really what's going to get you to the place you want to get. You want to be peppering these throughout the day. So he has, let me see if this is what I have here for the next slide. Yes, exactly. So one of the things that I absolutely love about this program is that if you go through the boot camp, you get access to an app. And this is an app that you could find in your app store, but you can't get it. You can't get into it unless you've actually gone through the boot camp and you're registered in the program. Once you're registered in the program, so this is mine. So I have an app on my phone, and every morning it gives me a lesson, a focus of the day. Usually it's about maybe how to build one of my sage powers, or it could be how to recognize my top saboteurs. So hyperachiever is one of my top saboteurs, and it might say, how does the hyperachiever affect relationships? And so I might learn about how the hyperachiever actually can create separation in relationships because of what it does. And so I'll learn those lessons, but I also have a little monitoring system, and it tells me, so this day that I took the snapshot, I was at 24 out of my 36 reps. It has a little charge. It tells me how my charge is. And so sometimes in some of our pods, in my pod that I'm running right now, we have this fun goal of trying to keep our charge up all day. And it's really hard to do, but it really helps you remember every few hours to do a few PQ reps. And then it kind of slowly you build that self-command muscle. So that's kind of monitoring your self-command. You'll notice there's a tab here for PQ. There's also a tab for your saboteurs and a tab for your sage. So it can also tell you kind of how you're progressing in terms of recognizing and getting clarity around your saboteurs and on your sage powers. And then it has what we have, a PQ gym. And in the PQ gym, you have these different audios that you can do, and they run 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or 12 minutes. So during the day, so like maybe right after this meeting, I have another Zoom meeting coming up in 15 minutes. But what I could do is jump up and do a 5-minute or sit down. I like these moving ones because I can walk while I'm doing them. And so I can just pace and do a 5-minute one, and that gets me into a calm mindset again. So I love the app. That's kind of one of the things probably that was the biggest draw for me in this program. So let me summarize it here. It's very, very simple, but not easy. So you need the practice to get good at it. But if you're feeling any negative emotion at all, you stop and you notice, and you recognize right away that you're in saboteur mode. Number 2, you do some PQ reps immediately. And so a lot of people will just do this right away to quiet your saboteurs and just help your brain recognize that you're in saboteur mode, listen to them, and activate sage. You assume the sage perspective by asking yourself, how can this particular situation or problem I'm in be converted to a gift or an opportunity? And then you generate the gift by using the sage powers: empathy, curiosity, creativity, calm, clear-headed action. So let me give you an example. I'm in a meeting and something I said triggered somebody. and they're starting to yell at me in the meeting. Now, normally I would be embarrassed, mortified at being yelled at in a meeting. I'd get defensive. I might go in, I have pleaser as one of my SABs. I might go into pleaser mode and just try accommodating and smoothing things over. So that's what I would typically do if that happened. So you could do that. You could just let your amygdala and your saboteurs kind of take over and react to that person who's yelling at you. However, if that person's yelling at me, I'm going to get the surge of emotion. For me, it's a surge of adrenaline, anxiety, and fear. So I'll have that happen, and I'll go, okay, I'm in saboteur mode. So I might do some PQ reps. If they're yelling at me, I might take some deep breaths. I might rub my fingers together, and I might ask myself, okay, what's going on here? Well, one of the things that I will ask myself, and this is really helpful to me, is if somebody's yelling at me, they're out of control, so they're in saboteur mode. So if they're in saboteur mode, what might they be going through? They're for sure hijacked. So now I get curious. So instead of getting all panicked, like, oh my God, he's mad at me, I've got to do something to fix this, now I'm getting curious, and I'm getting calmer as I'm getting curious. I'm like, oh, this person's yelling because they're hijacked. So why are they hijacked? What's a threat for them? And I get into empathy. And so I'm still dealing with it from my calm empathy place. I'm not using my pleaser and just backing down. I'm in that Jedi mindset. I'm starting to talk. I'm saying, okay, so what about this is bothering you? Where's the threat, right? And then that kind of calms down the agitation, and it gets us into conflict resolution. So that's kind of an example of how that happens. So question that people will ask, is it really possible to just do that, to just shift from saboteur to sage response, even in really tough challenges? The answer is yes, but the speed and depth of the shift depends on your mental muscle strength. In other words, you're not going to be able to, like if we talk about physical fitness, a lot of the reason he uses mental fitness to describe this is because it really helps people understand it. And, there's a great analogy there to physical fitness. And if you go to a gym, you can't just expect yourself to start lifting 100-pound weights. So for sure, things are still going to hijack you as you're going through this and building your mental muscle. But what happens is certain things that bother you a little bit won't bother you enough. And I can give you some evidence in the group that I'm taking through right now. We're in our week 6 of our 8 weeks, and I had 2 people in my meeting yesterday talk to me about a situation that is very, very stressful. Interestingly, it was both within their families with things that they would normally bite somebody's head off about. So they shared the situations, and then they shared how they responded to the situations. And they said, I couldn't do that if I wasn't in this program. If I wasn't doing this practice constantly, I would not have responded with empathy. I would not have responded with calm. I would have reacted, and that would have just made the situation worse. The thing that I think is also really, really important, and we're almost at the end here of the formal portion, and then we can have a discussion and take questions, is that when it comes, and this is something that Shirzad really kind of emphasized to those of us going through his program who are coaches, and that is that we do our coaching work with our clients, and they'll also often have these really great breakthroughs. And we think that the coaching is for the breakthroughs, and we're really excited because we think we're doing really great work with our clients because they have these mental breakthroughs. And unfortunately, those insights are really only 20% of the story, because they don't automatically lead to transformed behavior. Really, you have to use that practice. And we talk about the brain, the neuroplasticity in the brain. What we're really doing is rewiring our brain. And he has done studies that basically say that 15 minutes of practice for 6 to 8 weeks of these particular concepts, very intense practice, which is why we do it in a boot camp setting, actually has shown differences in people's brains in fMRI imaging. So what you're really doing in this boot camp is you're literally rewiring your brain. You're literally burning new neural pathways to the calmer part of your brain so that you go there more readily in the face of challenges.
Hey, Naheed, can I ask a question?
Sure, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. I had taken this guy's assessment where you identify which of the saboteurs
Mm-hmm.
seem to affect you the most. And I found that really interesting. So if other folks are interested in checking that out, I had to scroll through my results and get to the end to be invited to do that. I think there's another link to do that. But when we identify our saboteur, our particular saboteur that seems to be sabotaging us the most, how do you help people get beyond that? What is some of the approaches that you take?
That's a great question. And I'm going to address that actually right now. But I'll make sure that I circle back and give you a few more details on that. So if you wanted to apply this right now in your life, what are some things that you could do? So one thing you could do without doing anything else is start practicing PQ reps. So one PQ rep is 10 seconds of intense focus on a physical sensation. And just try to do 20 or 30 of these spread out throughout the day. And if you can develop a habit of that, you're going to notice a difference right away. The second thing is what Ryan just said, which is notice your saboteurs. Take the saboteur assessment. And for those of you who want to do it right now, you can. Or if you want to do it after the session, you can, but I'm going to show you where to go to take it. But it's that same website, and it's on the Saboteur tab. Read the profiles of your top saboteurs and see if you can notice how they show up in your life. If you can observe them, they have less power over you. So the first thing, Ryan, that you asked is how do we help people work with their saboteurs once they take that assessment and kind of identify their top three. So what ends up happening in your app as you're going through the boot camp is you have a whole week where you're working on the judge, and then you have a whole week where you're working on your top saboteur, right? So for the first step is recognizing it, and the second step is taking a few deep breaths or doing whatever your PQ rep is, and then kind of talking you through some of the SAGE prompts. So you begin to ask, what if I came to this from empathy? What if I came to this from curiosity? What if I came from this, so the avoider tends to procrastinate. What if I came from this from laser focused action? So there's various different powers. And what you're doing is you're asking yourself and pretty much learning to coach yourself to move to approaching situations with the 5 SAGE powers, as opposed to relying on the adrenaline that's created by your saboteurs. Make sense? So it's practice,
Yes.
practice.
Thank
Okay,
you.
which is our third bullet here, practice the SAGE perspective. So consider how everything in your life can be converted to a gift or an opportunity. So it requires noticing, calming down by using those PQ reps, and then kind of talking yourself through it by using the SAGE powers. So of course, the fourth thing you can do is order the book. And I find it to be a fantastic book. It's very, very helpful. One thing to know is if you do the boot camp, the audio version of the book is actually embedded in the application. So this is how you get to the saboteur assessment, if you want to take that. And then you'll get that report that I showed you. So if you want, you are welcome to contact me. If you happen to be a coach and you're like, oh gosh, I want to get certified in this, feel free to pick my brain about my experience so far. If you do the saboteur assessment and you want a more in-depth debriefing of the saboteur assessment, I would be happy to schedule 20 to 30 minutes on the phone with you to debrief your assessment with you and share kind of some tips that you can use to put into practice right away. If you're interested in the mental fitness boot camps, I have openings for about 2 more groups to go through in January, and my contact information is right there. I'm going to take it out of slideshow mode now, so if you're interested in that, feel free to do a screenshot.
So wrapping up, the rest of the session was Q&A and discussion, and if you'd like to watch all of it, remember the complete unedited version is on my YouTube channel. Meanwhile, whenever you're watching this, please feel free to contact me if you'd like to debrief your saboteur assessment, or if you'd like to ask questions about the next round of boot camps that I'm running. I'd like to personally thank Shirzad Chamine for writing this book and for sharing his contributions to our field, and also for training coaches like me to support his mission to help all people build a level of mental fitness that will serve them both in their personal and professional lives. If you'd like to learn more about Shirzad Chamine and his book, Positive Intelligence, or take the assessments, go to his website, www.positiveintelligence.com. To learn more about the Mental Fitness Bootcamp program facilitated by me, Nahid Casazza, contact me directly. You can email me at nahid@coachnahid.com, or you can text or call me at 714-931-2133. Thank you so much for joining today.